I never imagined that the profound grief of losing my husband, Tom, would somehow be intertwined with the impossible discovery of a betrayal that had haunted my life for over 4 decades. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that I, Margaret Thompson, was about to reclaim not just my life, but a piece of my soul they had tried to bury forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Just 3 months ago, my world had collapsed. Tom, my beloved husband of 30 years, the steady, kind heart beside me through thick and thin, had passed away unexpectedly. The shock alone nearly broke me, but then came the financial ruin. Turns out, the hardware store we'd co-owned, Thompson's Hardware, was a bottomless pit of hidden debts Tom had meticulously and tragically concealed from me. It was gone, every last cent, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of bills and a crushing sense of bewildered loss. At 54, I found myself widowed, bankrupt, and utterly adrift. I'd always prided myself on my resilience, on my ability to face challenges head-on. But this was different. I felt hollowed out, a shadow of the woman I used to be. My only option, if I wanted to keep a roof over my head that wasn't borrowed, was to take a live-in cleaning position at Morrison Manor, an opulent estate 2 hours north of my old life in Cleveland. The irony wasn't lost on me. From small business owner to housekeeper, in a house that could buy my entire former neighborhood. I swallowed my pride, packed my meager belongings, and drove north, a lump of dread and resignation in my throat. Morrison Manor was everything you'd expect from a billionaire's estate, and more. Gilded ceilings, marble floors that echoed with every step, sprawling grounds manicured to perfection. It reeked of old money, of secrets, of a world entirely alien to my own. On my first day, the head housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, gave me a tour, rattling off instructions about antique furniture and priceless artwork. My mind was still reeling from the sheer scale of the place, trying to process the fact that this was now my reality. We walked through vast hallways, past rooms filled with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, until we entered what Mrs. Gable called the family gallery. It was a smaller, more intimate space, lined with portraits of various generations of Morrisons. Most of them were stern-faced men and women in various states of Victorian or Edwardian finery, their eyes following you as you moved. My gaze drifted, barely registering them, until it snagged, hard, on one particular canvas. It was a woman, perhaps in her late 30s, with soft, kind eyes and a faint, knowing smile. Her hair was a warm chestnut brown, slightly wavy, falling just past her shoulders. My breath caught, my stomach plummeted, my vision blurred. It was impossible. It couldn't be, but the longer I stared, the more my heart screamed. It was Sarah. My Sarah, my little sister, who had vanished from our Cleveland backyard 42 years ago. On a sweltering July afternoon in 1983 when she was just 8 years old. I was 12 then, playing with her just moments before. We had searched, our parents had wept, the police had investigated, but she was gone, simply gone, presumed dead, a wound that had never, ever healed. Yet here, in this impossibly grand house, was her face, alive, vibrant, undeniably hers, labeled simply Sarah Morrison, beloved wife and mother. My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest, then stuffed back in, beating a chaotic rhythm of disbelief and terror. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Mrs. Gable, oblivious to my internal earthquake, continued her monologue about the next room. I barely heard her. I had to know. I needed answers. That very evening, still reeling, I managed to corner Daniel Morrison, the young billionaire owner of the Manor, the man whose wealth now employed me. He was in his late 20s, impeccably dressed, and carried the air of someone burdened by too much responsibility. His mother was Sarah Morrison, the woman in the portrait. He looked at me, a cleaning lady he'd barely noticed, with a polite, if distant, curiosity. "Mr. Morrison," I began, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. I saw the portrait in the gallery of your mother, Sarah Morrison." He nodded, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Yes, she's been gone for 8 years now. She disappeared, much like her own past, which she had recently started investigating." My blood ran cold. "Her past?" I whispered. "She was adopted, you see," Daniel explained, his voice softening. "My father, James Morrison, always told me he found her wandering alone near Pittsburgh when she was 8. She had amnesia, no memory of who she was, where she came from. He took her in, raised her. He said he saved her. But 8 years ago, she started digging. Hired a private investigator. She confronted my father about some things, and then she vanished, just like that. The private investigator died in a suspicious car accident 3 days later. It's always haunted me." He looked away, a shadow passing over his handsome features. My mind spun. My father, James Morrison, found her with amnesia, and then she disappeared again? This wasn't just Sarah. This was a lifetime of lies and manipulation. The sheer audacity of it, the cold-blooded rewriting of history, made my stomach churn. That moment, standing in that gilded cage of a house, something in me snapped. The broken woman, the widow in mourning, the bankrupt cleaning lady. She vanished. In her place stood Maggie Thompson, the older sister who had mourned for 42 years, now a woman with a singular, burning purpose. I didn't know what I would do or how I would do it, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I would find my sister, and I would expose every single lie. They would regret ever crossing the Thompson sisters. The very next day, I found myself facing Diana Morrison, Daniel's stepmother, and the current matriarch of this sprawling estate. She was a woman carved from ice, with eyes that assessed and dismissed, and a smile that never quite reached them. I knew, instinctively, that she was the key to this twisted puzzle. I waited until I saw her alone in the library, poring over documents. "Mrs. Morrison," I began, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. "I need to ask you about Sarah, about Daniel's mother." Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "And why, exactly, would a new employee be asking about such sensitive family matters?" Her voice was low, cutting, a subtle threat laced within each word. "Because," I said, meeting her gaze, "Sarah Morrison was my sister. My little sister, Sarah Thompson. She disappeared from our backyard when she was 8 years old, 42 years ago." Diana's perfectly made-up face didn't betray a flicker of surprise, only a cold, almost predatory calculation. "Ah, yes. I had a feeling you might realize that, given your intense interest in the portrait. A tragic story, to be sure, but the past is the past, isn't it, Margaret? And some secrets, especially those concerning the Morrison family, are best left buried. For everyone's sake." The implicit threat was clear. She knew. She was involved. And she intended to silence me. The confirmation, though chilling, also brought a perverse sense of clarity. My sister was alive, and this woman was actively keeping her hidden. The stakes had just become impossibly high, and I knew I couldn't do this alone. My first call was to my old friend, Detective Rosa Martinez, a Cleveland police detective I'd known for years. She'd seen me through Tom's death, and I knew I could trust her implicitly. I told her everything, the impossible story of Sarah's portrait, Daniel's revelations, Diana's veiled threats. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Maggie," Rosa finally said, her voice laced with concern. That's a lot, and it sounds like you're walking into something very dangerous." But I pressed on, laying out every detail, every gut feeling. To her credit, Rosa didn't dismiss me. She promised to look into anything she could, off the books, given the delicacy and the powerful Morrison name. My investigation began in earnest, conducted in stolen moments, with every nerve ending screaming. I started taking mental notes, little details about Diana, her movements, her phone calls. I couldn't write anything down yet, not with her watchful eyes seemingly everywhere. Then, a few days later, pure luck, or perhaps divine intervention, intervened. I was dusting near the study, a room Diana frequently used for private calls, when I heard snippets of conversation. Diana's voice, sharp and urgent, speaking to someone about Pinehaven and the transfer. "She's becoming too lucid," I heard Diana hiss into the phone. "We need to move her to the facility in Canada before she can cause any trouble, and make sure all her records, everything, is destroyed before she leaves. I don't want a single trace left." My blood ran cold. Pinehaven, Canada. Destroying records. Becoming too lucid. It could only mean one thing. Sarah was alive, held captive, heavily medicated, and about to be moved permanently, silenced forever. I now had a name, a location, and a terrifying deadline. I immediately sought out Daniel. He was in his home office, surrounded by multiple computer screens, his expression typically intense. I poured out everything I'd just overheard, the pieces falling into place, the horrific truth now undeniable. Sarah wasn't just missing, she was imprisoned. Daniel listened, his face slowly draining of color, a look of utter horror dawning in his eyes. He confirmed Pinehaven was a private treatment facility about 2 hours north of Cleveland, owned by a shadowy corporation with ties to his family's trust. "My stepmother had my mother declared mentally incompetent 3 years ago," he whispered, his voice hoarse with disgust, "to control her will, her assets. She's been paying them $200,000 a year to keep her there. All this time. My mother has been there, a prisoner." His initial shock quickly morphed into a quiet, furious resolve. "We're getting her out, Maggie," he declared, his eyes blazing. "Whatever it takes." Our alliance was forged in that moment, a desperate pact against a powerful, heartless enemy. Daniel, with his staggering wealth and incredible tech skills, became the strategic mastermind. I, with my lived experience of pain and my burning desire for justice, was the relentless force. Rosa, my steady anchor in the storm, promised to do what she could from the shadows. Our preparation was meticulous, fueled by adrenaline and cold fury. Daniel immediately began his technical preparations, hacking into Pinehaven's digital systems, mapping out their security, their staff rotations, their camera blind spots. He created encrypted communication channels for us, ensuring Diana couldn't intercept our plans. I, meanwhile, became Diana's shadow, not just cleaning but observing. I noted her routines, the time she left the manor, the names of her associates, her hushed phone calls, now meticulously documented in a small, hidden notebook. I also started making copies of any Morrison family papers I could subtly access, old bank statements, legal documents, anything that might hint at James Morrison's past, Sarah's adoption, or Diana's financial dealings related to Pinehaven. It was dangerous work, but the thought of Sarah alone and drugged gave me the courage to push through the fear. Daniel set up covert surveillance on the manor and on Diana's other properties, anticipating her moves. We met in secret, often late at night after the manor staff had retired, huddled over glowing screens, piecing together the puzzle. Daniel discovered Diana had recently made arrangements to accelerate Sarah's transfer to Canada, confirming my overheard conversation. The clock was ticking faster than we thought. "She's trying to cut off all loose ends," Daniel explained, his jaw tight. "She probably suspects you, Maggie. She's getting nervous." This only solidified our resolve. Rosa, meanwhile, had been quietly pulling strings. She couldn't officially sanction a raid, not yet, not without undeniable proof. But she provided invaluable intelligence, detailed layouts of Pinehaven, security protocols for medical facilities, and the names of a few discreet contacts within the local sheriff's department who might turn a blind eye or be unavailable at a crucial moment. She also began researching the original missing persons case for Sarah Thompson from 1983, digging into archived reports, seeing if anything had been overlooked. It was a long shot, but we needed every angle. The night of the rescue arrived with a thick, oppressive fog, a fitting backdrop for our desperate mission. Daniel, Rosa, and I drove in separate, unmarked cars converging silently on a secluded road 2 miles from Pinehaven. Daniel's face was grim, his tech glasses glinting in the dim dashboard light. Rosa, dressed in dark clothing, was all business, a silent warrior. My heart hammered against my ribs, a chaotic drum solo of fear and hope. We parked in a wooded area, and then, under the cover of the fog, we made our approach. Daniel had identified a maintenance tunnel entrance that was rarely monitored. His hack had already disabled the external cameras for a brief, critical window. The air inside the tunnel was cold and damp, smelling of earth and old concrete. We moved like ghosts, guided by Daniel's whispered instructions. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every creak a potential discovery. We emerged into the facility's basement, moving swiftly through service corridors, Daniel expertly navigating the internal security systems, disabling cameras one by one. Finally, we reached the secure wing. Daniel had discovered Sarah's room number. As he bypassed the electronic lock, my hand trembled. This was it. 42 years of waiting, of mourning, of believing she was gone. The room was stark, sterile. A single bed, a chair, a small window covered by bars. And there, lying almost lifelessly in the bed, was Sarah. She was thinner than I remembered, her hair dull, her skin pale. But it was her, my little sister. My eyes immediately welled up, but I forced back the tears. There would be time for that later. She stirred slightly as we approached, mumbling incoherently. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, clouded by years of powerful sedatives. Maggie. The name formed silently on my lips, a prayer, a desperate plea for her to recognize me. We gently lifted her, her body limp and unresponsive, wrapping her in a thick blanket Daniel had brought. Just as we were about to exit the room, Daniel's phone vibrated. He froze, listening intently. It was Diana. She was on the phone with someone, furious, demanding an immediate update on Sarah's status. "I told you to move her tonight." Her voice crackled, barely audible, but filled with venom. "Before that cleaning woman Maggie could cause any more trouble. I don't care if she's lucid or not, get her on that plane to Canada now. And if anyone gets in our way, make sure they understand the consequences of interfering with the Morrison family." Daniel, with incredible foresight and quick thinking, had already activated a recording app on his phone and was subtly capturing the entire, incriminating conversation. He immediately uploaded the audio to a prearranged, secure server, then fired off anonymous tips to a dozen major news outlets and his own legal team, attaching the audio. "It's out," he whispered, a grim satisfaction in his voice. She just incriminated herself to the world. The escape was a blur of adrenaline and fear. We managed to get Sarah into the waiting car, then sped away into the fog-shrouded night, Rosa's car providing a discreet escort. Sarah was safe, for now, but we knew this was just the beginning. Diana wouldn't take this lying down. The immediate fallout was precisely as we anticipated. Within hours, the news channels were ablaze with reports of the leaked audio, the Morrison family scandal, and the alleged illegal detention of Sarah Morrison. Diana, utterly exposed and furious, immediately launched a furious legal counteroffensive. She publicly denounced the recording as a fabrication, accused us of kidnapping, and reiterated that Sarah was severely mentally incompetent, painting us as opportunistic conspirators preying on a fragile woman. We had to act fast, not just to protect ourselves, but to prove Sarah's competency and expose the decades-long conspiracy. While Sarah, still heavily sedated and disoriented, began a slow, painful process of recovery under the watchful eyes of a trusted medical team assembled by Daniel, we focused on building our case. Sarah's recovery was paramount, but her testimony, once she was stable enough, would be crucial. In the meantime, we had to dismantle Diana's lies. Daniel, working tirelessly, compiled all the financial records he'd meticulously gathered. showing Diana's massive payments to Pinehaven, her attempts to change Sarah's will, and her systematic efforts to isolate her. This was solid proof of her conspiracy to illegally imprison Sarah. But the biggest piece of the puzzle remained. How did Sarah end up with James Morrison in the first place? How was an 8-year-old girl, snatched from her backyard, simply found by a wealthy man with amnesia? It smelled of a much older, deeper deception. Rosa, now fully invested, had made progress with the old missing persons case. "Maggie," she called one evening, "I found something odd in the original police reports. A mention of your mother's church, St. Matthew's Lutheran, getting a call from a concerned parishioner about your family's distress a few days before Sarah disappeared. And then a small entry in the church's financial ledger dated July 12, 1983, of $5,000, emergency family assistance, payment, the recipient, Eleanor Patterson." My blood ran cold. Eleanor Patterson. I remembered her. She was a close friend of my mother's, a kindly woman from our church. But $5,000 in 1983? That was a substantial sum. We immediately tracked down St. Matthew's Lutheran Church's old records. Sure enough, there it was. Emergency family assistance. Eleanor Patterson, $5,000. Just 3 days before Sarah vanished. The hairs on my arms stood on end. It was too specific, too close. This wasn't about assistance. It was about payment. We knew we had to find Eleanor Patterson's family. We found her daughter, Linda Patterson, who was a few years younger than me, someone I'd known casually in high school. Linda was hesitant at first, clearly uncomfortable, but Daniel, with his quiet intensity, gently explained the situation, the decades of pain, the injustice. Maggie's desperate plea for truth finally broke through. Linda's eyes filled with tears as she listened. "My mother, she confessed it to me on her deathbed just a few years ago," Linda whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She was so remorseful, so tormented by it. "She said James Morrison approached her. Knowing she was close to your family, he offered her $5,000, a fortune to our family back then, to help him borrow a child. He promised he'd take care of her, that she'd have a better life, that no one would be harmed. He convinced my mother that your parents wouldn't be able to provide for you girls, that Sarah would be safe and happy with him. He manipulated her, Maggie. He promised she wouldn't truly be gone, just different. My mother took Sarah from your backyard that day, drove her to a prearranged spot, and handed her over to James Morrison's associates. She never saw her again. It haunted her until the day she died. Linda's testimony was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle, a confession that connected all the dots, proving the original kidnapping was a deliberate, calculated act. Armed with Linda Patterson's tearful confession, Daniel's incriminating recordings of Diana, the church records, and the detailed evidence of Diana's financial manipulations in illegal imprisonment, the case against Diana Morrison was undeniable. The combined weight of evidence was overwhelming. Daniel's legal team moved swiftly, with Detective Martinez's assistance in securing warrants and orchestrating the arrest. Diana Morrison was taken into custody. The charges were extensive: kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy, and several counts of financial fraud. The Morrison family name, once a symbol of untouchable power, was now irrevocably tainted, dragged through the mud of scandal and criminal charges. Diana's world, built on lies and ruthless ambition, crumbled around her. Her assets were frozen, her legal defenses shattered, her reputation in ruins. She would face a long, hard fall. Justice, it seemed, had a very long memory. In the aftermath, the silence of the Morrison Manor was a stark contrast to the storm that had raged through its halls. Sarah, though still fragile, was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding her life. The heavy sedatives were gradually withdrawn, and with each passing day, a little more of the old Sarah, my sweet, playful sister, began to emerge. Her hands, which had trembled constantly from the medication, steadied. Her eyes, once vacant, began to focus, to see me, to see Daniel, to see her true family. We spent hours talking, me sharing stories of our childhood, of our parents, of all the years she'd been gone. Daniel brought old family photos, patiently filling in the blanks of her stolen memories. It was a slow process, punctuated by moments of confusion and pain, but also by incredible breakthroughs, by flashes of recognition, by the tentative rebuilding of a lost identity. The concept of home shifted dramatically for all of us. I certainly wasn't going to remain a cleaning lady in that opulent cage. Daniel, horrified by the legacy of his father's crimes and his stepmother's cruelty, made a profound commitment to atone. He systematically began dismantling the opaque financial structures that had protected his family's secrets for so long. He personally oversaw the sale of many of the Morrison assets, including the manor itself, diverting the proceeds towards ethical causes. His most significant act of redemption was the establishment of Sarah's House, a state-of-the-art shelter for missing children, dedicated to prevention, recovery, and providing a safe haven for those who had been lost. It was a beautiful, tangible monument to healing and hope, transforming a tainted legacy into a force for good. As for Sarah and me, we chose a new beginning. Together, we pooled our modest resources, my small severance from the hardware store, a settlement Daniel insisted on for Sarah, and bought a small, cozy house with a wraparound porch in a quiet, leafy suburb of Cleveland. It wasn't a manor, not by a long shot, but it was ours. It was home. We filled it with laughter, with quiet conversations, with the comforting rhythm of shared meals and rediscovered sisterhood. We would often sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, hands clasped, simply grateful for the present. Daniel became a regular fixture, joining us for weekly family dinners, his presence a constant reminder that even from the darkest of family secrets, light could emerge. Justice wasn't about vengeance, not anymore. It was about restoration, about reclaiming what had been stolen and building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. It was about knowing my sister was finally free, truly free, and that the truth, however painful, had finally come to light. It was about finding purpose again, not in the pursuit of wealth, but in the unwavering bond of family. Our story, once a tragedy of loss and deceit, had become a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of love, and to the unwavering belief that truth will always, always find its way. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.